Welcome back, my little chickens, to Just for Farm. Oh, see the chicken reference there. I'll do anything to get a farming gag in. Welcome back, my little chickens, to Just for Farmers. As always, I'm with the legend that is Lord Paul Harris. Hi, Paul.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening.
I don't think he's got over his cold yet, but he's just being a bit of a diva about it. But he'll probably mute himself to sniffle, and we'll mock him.
Excuse me, he's got a cold. Man flu. You need to understand.
Man flu. That's it. Man flu. And today we've got a very different guest. We've had people with farming experience, people from the farming industry. We've had experts on physical well-being and all sorts of different subjects for you. And today I thought we'd do something very different, a bit left field. A very old speaking buddy of mine is Darren Harris. Hi, Darren. How you doing?
Hi, David.
Now, Darren has given me quite a decent introduction. Unlike most speakers, you see, you can spot a pro a mile off. They give you a good introduction so that you don't make stuff up and make them look bad. So I'll start off with Darren's introduction, and then I'm going to let him introduce himself with a little bit of a backstory on why we should be listening to Darren. So Darren is a multi-disciplined para-olympian, psychologist, fully qualified. He didn't just get it from a cornflakes box. He inspires and enables people to overcome adversity in business, education, and their personal life. Get this. He's one of England's most capped he's England's most capped, and in the top 3 England most capped footballers. If anyone goes to St. George's Park, we've got this massive wall in reception, the Honours Wall, and Darren is one of only 3 footballers who has got more than, is it 150 caps, Darren?
Correct.
The guy, one of my mates on the Legends Wall, beating people like David Beckham and Wayne Rooney and all the rest of them. So I'm so proud of him. Anyway, he's not only England's most clap-blind footballer, he's an honorary doctor, a best-selling author, and that's not despite, but because of his blindness. Darren is one of the most ferociously independently minded people I've ever met in my life. He's got a drive. He's got a drive, a relentlessness about him. So, Darren, tell us a little bit, like a 2-minute potted resume of your life, mate.
I was going to say I've got a drive, but without a car. So
yeah.
So I was born with bilateral retinoblastoma. So I had cancer in both my eyes. My left eye was removed. My right eye was treated with radiotherapy. And as I got older, the treatment I had meant that my sight gradually got worse and worse and worse over the next 20 years or so. And I think for pretty much half my life, maybe more than that, my entire focus was on returning back to this state. It was like, well, can I restore my sight? Can I restore? I'd go to the hospital every single year. I would see these doctors and I'd be hoping for this miracle cure. And these doctors would tell me that my sight was getting worse and there was nothing they could do about it.
Wow.
And, I was in a dark place, literally and metaphorically. And sorry, mate. Is that better than your chicken joke?
That's worth a ripple of applause just for that gag alone.
But I think, I suppose the epiphany for me was when I realized that it really wasn't my blindness that was stopping me from achieving what I wanted in life. It was how I thought and how I felt about that. And so I came up with this idea that, I couldn't restore my sight, but I could unblind my mind, which was really about changing my whole mindset around what blindness meant to me.
Right. And okay, so let's start there. What did it mean to you?
So I think initially you kind of you're told about all of the sort of physical and social reasons why blindness is a challenge. So you can't see how to cross, cars when you're crossing the road. You're not going to see holes in the road. You're not going to be able to find the lift when you enter a building. There was all these sort of very practical, pragmatic reasons why blindness is so difficult. And some of those could be kind of overcome maybe by, socially changing the environment and things like that. Yeah. But also for me, it was very much how that made me feel. So blindness became something that was inferior to sight. And so anytime you've got some inferiority complex, you're not going to feel particularly great about yourself. So being blind was something that people would encourage people to feel sympathy for me or patronize me. I mean, I still have these moments even now where I can stand at a bus stop and people will come up and start praying for me, for example, because they assume that my life is awful and terrible because I'm blind. And so for me, I had to sort of remove all of that baggage and actually start to think about blindness in a positive light. And, you know, how could I think that blindness was actually an advantage for me as opposed to a disadvantage?
What you said there, I want to dig a bit deeper. If you'll allow us to ask sort of personal questions, feel free to say I'd rather not answer that, Dave. But you said you realized very early on it was about how you thought and felt, and that you weren't after sympathy. And I'm trying to think of our watchers and listeners to this who are farmers. They're from a sort of long-standing, pass it down the heritage line on the farm place and industry where they want massive change to happen, but they want someone else to do it because they're stuck where they are. And what you've said there, I'm going to make a massive assumption, and I'm sure a lot of farmers will try and shoot me down in flames for saying this, but I have met some farmers for whom they're not prepared to change how they think and feel. And actually, they'll moan about it, and not perhaps from a place of wanting sympathy, but just not wanting to take control. Everything you've described about your journey was about you taking control. So was there a moment where you decided to take control of how you think and how you feel? And if so, how on earth did you do it?
Well, there's a sort of biomedical and sort of social model of disability. So on one hand, the biomedical model kind of said that the cause of my blindness was this cancer, and the only treatment for that was, you know, for my sight to be restored. And the only person who could do that was the medical profession. You know, they were the arbiters, the people who quotes my fate was in. And then you've got on the other aspect the sort of social model of disability, which kind of says that, well, I'm blind because of the structure of the environment. Now, the only way we can treat that is for us to change that environment, for example. And again, the only people who are in control of that are perhaps government policy or social values. And so we sometimes kind of cast this in the sort of nature versus nurture debate. But I've always believed there's like an intersection between, you know, so what comes between our genes and our environment, and truly it's us. And so I realized that you know, if those things were the case and I had no control over that, the only thing I could change was how I thought about it and how I felt about it. So for me, those two models limited my agency for change, and that I had to think about what I could do. So when I was going to the doctors and hoping that they'd come up with this miracle cure to fix my eyes, and they couldn't, well, what was left? And if I went to social services and said, well, you know, this road hasn't got a pelican crossing on it, or there's no bobbles on this particular street, you know, if they didn't do that, what was left? You know, and what was left is my own thoughts and my own feelings, and therefore it was about me taking ownership of those and making that change myself.
And how did you, though? How did you take control? Because that's very easy for someone like yourself to say, who's now got, you know, a couple of decades behind him of being ferociously independent, taking control of your thoughts and feelings. For most people, to take control of their thoughts and feelings is one of the biggest things they'll ever do. So how did you start?
Well, I think one of the big areas that changed everything for me was when I went to, I'd come out of a mainstream school where I was the only blind kid in my school. And then I went to a boarding school for blind kids.
Right.
And I think we're taught to a certain degree that, you know, if you're biblical, I know some people are, there's a statement in Matthew 15, which talks about the blind leading the blind. And it was almost like that sighted people believed that they were the guides for the blind, you know. And I realized that the only people that could really teach me how to manage the world of being blind were other blind people. And I think it's really important in terms of, you know, who we seek out for our support and our help, that we find it from the right people. So these blind people here were like showing me things that I didn't know were possible. And I remember the first encounter was, I remember I still had sight. I still had a bit of sight. I still could see large objects. I could still kind of recognize people. And there was this occasion when I was standing there talking to a friend of mine, and I could hear this bike coming in the distance, and there was this whirring of the bike. And I looked round, and it was a tandem, but you know, you might expect on a tandem that the pilot is the person who could see and the stoker is the person who's blind. But this was in reverse. They had the totally blind person on the front of the bike. Wow. And I was like, wow, how is this possible? This is like, these were like, I don't know if you know the Daredevil comic strip. These were like real life daredevils in my kind of vicinity. These were people who were living it in practice and doing these incredible things. And for the first time, I thought, actually, being blind is pretty cool. You know, maybe there's things that they can do that sighted people can't do, and then maybe there's an advantage to this. And so they began to just show me this way of living and doing things, which was completely fearless. And I didn't know how they did it. I didn't know that they were using a technique called echolocation, but I would kind of go out there and sort of test myself. So I used to go and stand in an alleyway, for example, and I would listen to the cars. So if you're in an alleyway and it's quite a narrow alleyway, the sound will kind of echo off both walls. And I would test myself to see if I could pick which direction the car was coming from by working out which wall it hit first. And I would just have fun with it. I just play little games, little experiments, little tests.
Wow.
You know, could I navigate my way through this environment, you know, without sight, without even a cane, for example. And so there was all these sorts of things that people were doing, which just blew my mind. And so that was a real kind of grounding for me. I learned some really tough but really valuable lessons in that environment.
Incredible. Paul, I've got loads of questions. Paul, have you got something you want to say?
I was just going to ask, because this as a metaphor, Darren, you know, what you're describing, I love the blind leading the blind, is that it's so easy for us to copy the crowd. And in farming, we spend a lot of time with each other. It's quite I wouldn't say it's a closed industry, but we enjoy spending time with other farmers. The risk with that is that you only ever hear what other farmers are saying. So you suddenly had this transformation of hearing people that could really inspire you. And I think that's really helpful for our farmers to think about, who do they talk to? Do you talk to the people that are saying, oh, it's a nightmare, it's terrible? Or do you talk to people, you know, who are thinking more positively? So have you surrounded yourself with positive people? I mean, you must have had down days, Darren. I mean, you wouldn't be human if going through a blindness journey, you must have had your tough days. So whilst we hear the positives, my question is, how did you deal with those down days? And did you reach out? Who did you reach out to during those times?
So I actively seek out those sort of positive people, and I guess perhaps some of them seek me out as well. So you know, you do find yourself in this strange little world where even though what you do is considered abnormal by most of society, in my circle of friends, what we do is perfectly normal. And so I've surrounded myself by people who run ultra marathons, who want to set Guinness Book of Records for riding 24 hours on a stationary bike and do these incredibly crazy mad things. And you kind of think, how is that possible? And also, why would you want to do that? But somehow it's really infectious, isn't it? So those moments when I do feel down and you know, and they happen, I just draw upon those people and say, okay, what would they do in that situation? Or I just give them a call and say, you know what, it's not going great today. But what I know more than anything is that even on the days, and so sport has become a massive part of my life. And I think we sell sport really badly, because most people do sport either to lose weight, to get fit, or to get big muscles. You know, we all want big muscles. But it's almost been missold, because for me, it's always been my go-to pick me up. So sport isn't just about the winning the medals. And you see a lot of athletes, even when they finish sport, then they pile on the weight, and some of them look like they've never done sport in their life, because they've literally kind of gone off the rails.
I used to be an elite athlete. Yeah.
That's the one, David. Yes, before I knew you, you were. But I've used it as this tool to pick me up, and I've never come back from a training session regretting doing it. And so even those days when I least want to do it, and now we're coming into winter and it's going to be dark and cold, wet, pretty miserable. And those are the days where our instincts when we're feeling sorry for ourselves is to just lie in the corner, curl up in a ball, cover ourselves in the duvet, close the curtains, forget about the world for a while. It's those days when I think it's most important that we literally get out, get moving, because we were designed to move, and just do something. And it changes my state. Every time I go and train, go to the gym, go for a run, literally instantaneously, it changes my state. And so that's one tool that I've always got. And if you're not sporting, lots of people aren't. There are other ways. There's music, there's art, but I think there's finding a way to give yourself some respite from those moments of darkness. And even if it's only for a moment, it's still better than you've been in this constant state where these thoughts are just circling around your head and on an endless feedback loop. And you need to find this sort of circuit breaker. So, some people use cold water therapy, don't they? Get in a cold shower, and it literally just shocks you out of like, I'm not thinking about the crap that's going on in my life at the moment. I'm thinking this water is really cold.
So let me ask you a question, Darren, because this is very applicable for our farmers. So, and I hear this quite a lot. Farming's very intense. It's very long hours. So if you were living on a farm with lots of land around you, would you ever want to go and walk or run on that land, or would you just ignore it? It's a leading question, because what I'm really saying is, I can imagine if you were in that environment, you would, although you can't see it, you'd go out and maximize what you've got around you. Whereas I think often with farmers, they forget they're often living in amazing places, sometimes on the coast, sometimes in the hills, and they never go out and walk or run.
That's right. They take it for granted. A lot of us do, don't we? You don't have to be a farmer for that to happen. I've got a lot of friends who during COVID realized that they couldn't go anywhere. And one of my good friends discovered there was these woods behind her house, and she's been living there 10 years. Yes. And she goes, I never knew this was here on my doorstep. And so sometimes, those things that can help us are really on our doorstep, and we could definitely make use of it. Perhaps it's wanting that separation between work and play, that some maybe because it's their place of work, it's not as easy to sort of separate yourself from that. Just a little bit like people who have started working from home now struggle to sort of separate their home life from their work life. So maybe there is something in that. But even if it's not around exercise or they said there are other ways we can do things which don't always have to take lots and lots of time. It's just being mindful about it and actively choosing to do something different and get into a routine where this is your kind of go-to thing.
Darren, I'm going to ask you about mindset again, because, and again, Darren, for those listening to this, Darren is quite modest. So not only has he got these sort of sporting and psychology prowess, but he has, and please tell me if I've messed this up, Darren, he has represented at elite level Great Britain in 3 different disciplines: athletics, football, and judo. Is that right, Darren?
Correct, yeah.
Now he's too old to play football. He's going back to judo again. Now, so what I'm hearing is you just need to stick at something, Darren. A bit of consistency, mate, and you'll do all right. But in order for that to happen, you've had to do exactly what you've just been telling us. You've had to surround yourself with good people, and more importantly, ask for help when you need it, but also change the way you think and feel. And I'm putting words into your mouth. What you did was you took ownership, you took responsibility, and you were the change that you wanted to experience in the world. And I loved what you said about never regret a training session. You've never left a training session regretting doing it. And about 2 years ago, you and I sat at a dinner table with another visually impaired sporting superstar, Dave Healy, blind Dave Healy, world record holder and runner of marathons, and he does crazy stuff. He's a carpenter and he's blind. He builds amazing furniture and infrastructure. And he's blind. He's using all those sharp tools. And for someone like me, I just look at that and go, wow, I can't do it. And I can see. And, and he says, you learn because you have to.
Yeah.
It's just because what are the consequences of not? Now, so Darren, this mindset, put yourself in the position of a farmer or a member of a farming family. It's tough times at the moment. We've got climate affecting them. We've got subsidies affecting them. Everything could be possibly making them feel and think not positive things. What is something they could do today that would help them on this journey, start them off on this change of mindset to be more positive outcome focused?
So I suppose we always have to acknowledge that, in any form of adversity, there are, it can actually, push us over the edge. So, and I think acknowledging that kind of makes us respect it. So every challenge that we face, and sometimes it can be those really big things, but sometimes it can be those little things that just accumulate and kind of nag away us and just break down our resistance over a period of time. So I think I think the easiest thing that we could all do is what you mentioned before around asking for help. I remember when I was losing my sight, and maybe it's easier now because I've lost all of my sight, that sometimes I just don't have a choice but to ask for help. But when I was in between, that was almost a more difficult time for me, because I had to then make a choice between, well, I could do this on my own, but it's going to take me twice as long. So if I went into a shop, for example, I could go and find the items I wanted, but it meant I was going to have to peer at all the items one by one. There'd be a queue of people gathered behind me, kind of thinking, hoping get out of our way. Or I could go up to the counter, get a member of staff, and get that person to make me do that job quicker. And that was a dilemma that I went through. And I think where I came to as a kind of as a resolution to that was that, I suppose, as we come into this world, we're in a state of dependence. We're completely reliant on our parents to do everything for us. Then we want to be super independent. We want to show the world that we can do stuff, So if you're a parent, your children are going for that phase where they want to show you that they can do stuff on their own. But I think there's a point beyond that, which is interdependence, when we realize that actually there are things that we can help others do, and there are things that others can help us do. And so then asking for help then doesn't seem like it's this sort of a hierarchical thing. It's more of a reciprocal thing.
So Darren, what do you think would stop somebody asking for help? Because I've got a word in my head here. I'm just curious from your perspective, because I think what you just said is so important for our farming community, because they often don't. But why do you think people don't ask for help?
I think it depends. I think there's lots of reasons, but we have got this sort of stoicism. We're meant to just kind of put up and shut up. I think sometimes we can think, well, there's other people who've got things worse than us, so I don't want to complain. I think there's embarrassment. Perhaps if it's particularly as men, perhaps we're less inclined to ask for help than women. And I think that maybe that's because it doesn't match our kind of our macho ideal of how we see ourselves. So there's a certain element of identity, how we identify as people, and we want to be perceived in a particular way. So to ask for help would to admit that we're not quite as strong and as powerful as we'd like to be.
And I think, thank you, and I think I really want our listeners to hear that, because the word I had in my head was pride. Sometimes pride gets in the way of a fall. Pride comes before a fall, doesn't it? And particularly, I think I would be encouraging our listeners and watchers to not see it as weakness. Vulnerability now is often seen as a strength rather than a weakness. But in the farming community, men particularly don't like to admit they're struggling. And I think, yeah, but to ask for help can be a sign of strength, I think, not a sign of weakness. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I mean, when you go into the gym, you get a spotter, don't you? So that the heavier the weight that you're lifting, you need someone on hand to kind of help you, lift that weight. And also, if you've gone a bit too heavy and the bar comes crashing down on your chest, you're going to need a spotter to come and take that bit of weight off for you. So there are definitely moments that when we're rock bottom, when we're struggling, when we're at our weakest point, that is the moment when we most need that support.
Brilliant.
And the something I thought of, which is unlike me, because I'm not clever, but about a year ago, that's not true, about 2.5 years ago, we were having some really big challenges in our house here, and I was feeling really quite low. And I always remember people saying, you're at your best just before that moment of success. You've done all the hard work, and it's just that last step, and you're at your very, very best. And I was actually thinking, no, that's not true, because sometimes it's when you've been given that kick in the face, you've been put down, knocked down, you've had the failures and the knockbacks, and you're face down in the dirt, and you want to give in, but in that moment you say, no, not yet. And you go again. And in that moment, that's when I think people are at their strongest. Not when they're just before the final success. You're at your strongest, as you would say, Darren, when it's pouring down with rain on a cold Sunday morning at 5 a.m. and it's sleeting, dark and windy outside. You could just hit snooze, pull the duvet in and have another 10 minutes. But go training in the rain. That's when you're at your strongest, not as you're crossing the finishing line.
Yeah. And I think, it's taking some sort of strength from that. So, my friends, those strange friends of mine that come out for me on those runs on that Sunday morning when it's cold and sleety and etc. We sometimes, we might run past someone's house and you can see, someone snuggled up by a fire through a window or something. And you kind of think, yeah.
So you can see.
Well, no. Oh, I've been lying all these years.
All these years, Darren.
He's been rumbled.
Been rumbled and live on the Farmers podcast. Don't report me, guys. There's still one. But you take some solace from that. Like, yeah, I could be like that, but actually, this is doing something extraordinary. And I do, and I've always believed that comfort is the enemy of progress. So the moment we are feeling comfortable, then we're not going to be moving forwards. And so that adversity, those challenges that we face, are always going to make us better in the long term. I truly believe.
I love the way you mix. Many people in your position have got sort of inspirational quotes, anecdotes, stories, but actually, because you're a very pragmatic guy with a psychology background, everything you're saying, you're backing up as well with, and this is why that works, and this is how this works, and I'm loving that. I'm loving that. Do you know what? I just want to keep talking to you, mate, but we're fast running out of time here. Paul, is there anything else you'd like to ask of Darren?
Yeah, just really, I've got a couple of things that I've listened to, and I thought the heavier weight you lift, the more you need to ask for help. I thought was fantastic metaphor for a lot of our farmers, that right now they're lifting heavy weights. If you're a dairy farm and the milk price has gone down, it's because environmental pressures. So now is the time when you're lifting those heavy weights to go to your spotters, using your metaphor. That was really good. But I was just going to say, if there was one or two pieces of advice, final piece of advice you would give to somebody who's maybe in that sort of poor me place. This is all a bit, the world's against me. No one understands farming, and and you need them to change their mindset. What would be your one or two tips that you would leave people with, Darren?
I think for a long time, I was asking myself the question of why am I blind? What have I done to deserve this? And we used to look at all the sort of, there was the sort of the biological explanation. If there was a genetic mutation on chromosome 13. Okay, well, what can I do with that? Not an awful lot. And so and in the end, I came to the idea that, you know, that was just how it was meant to be. You know, that was out of my control. There was nothing I could do about that to change that situation. And so whatever cards you are dealt with, I truly believe there is a way. There is a way. I mean, you might not know what it is at the moment. You might have to change direction. You might have to go backwards, sideways, under it, whatever your way around that obstacle is. But once you believe there is a way to do something, then you can start to think about, okay, well, how? What are the options? What different things are there out there? And that's where we can draw on our network to ask people, you know, what have you tried? What have you tried? What have you tried? And they might not come up with a solution, but it doesn't mean there isn't a solution, because most of the problems in the world are solvable. There are very few things which are intractable, you know, unless there's a sort of a physical reason, like, you know, there's the law of gravity which you're trying to override.
My stomach's dealing with that one right now.
Most problems, almost every problem out there has a solution.
Darren, what I'm taking from this is not just sort of ask for help and seek positive people, but it's more than that. It is but you've actually given us ways of taking control of how we think and feel. That is so important. It's the first step to take a personal responsibility for ourselves. And even though it was for you a reasonably throwaway comment, I'm actually taking real resolve here about you never regret walking away from a training session. It is in the days where it appears mundane. You know, oh, farmer, I've got to clean the yard again, or I've got to hose down the tractor, or I've got to go and seed the land, or I've got to go and do that hedgerow, and I don't get paid for doing hedges. And, you know, it's in those days where actually, if you can do it to the best of their ability with a positive mindset and a smile on your mush, life gets better. And I think we need to celebrate rather than criticize the mundane sometimes, because it's in the mundane that the magic happens at the end. Darren, honestly, I could talk with you for a week. So maybe if we do another series, we'll have you back. But Darren, thank you very much for your time. Paul, any last comments?
Just fantastic. Every problem has a solution.
Every problem has a solution.
That's what Darren.
Darren, if people want to get hold of you, because you're a fantastic speaker, so if anybody wants to get hold of you, how can they get hold of you?
Okay, DarrenHarrisGB.com is my website, and I am on all social media channels. It's set for TikTok at Darren Harris GB. So yeah, if you've enjoyed what I've said today, if you've got something useful and valuable out of it, please comment. And yeah, if you know anyone who'd be interested in me speaking for them, I'd love to know about that.
And for those that are listening, it's Darren with an E, D-A-R-R-E-N, not D-A-R-R-A-N, just to make sure you find the right website.
Right. There you go.
And guys, by the way, you know, you can imagine doing judo with a visual impairment. You could imagine sprinting with a visual impairment. But if anyone's thinking blind football, how hard could that be? Go onto YouTube and watch some blind football. These guys are amazing.
Brazil. I'd love to send them to watch me playing blind football. I'm all right, but Brazil are like next level. So if you want to watch some true magic on a football pitch, then honestly, they will blow your mind, because they blow mine.
Darren, thank you very much indeed for being part of Just for Farmers today.
Thanks a lot, guys.
We'll see you again soon. See you on the next episode. Cheers.